Think every 1970s American muscle car announced itself with loud paint, hood scoops, and roaring V8s? Think again. Hidden among ordinary-looking family sedans and compact commuters were factory-built sleeper cars that could humiliate Camaros, Mustangs, Chevelles, and even some modern performance cars without anyone seeing it coming. In today's countdown, we're revealing the 15 rarest sleeper muscle cars of the 1970s. From forgotten AMCs and Buicks to secret performance Fords, Dodges, and Pontiacs that most enthusiasts have never heard of, hit subscribe now. Because we've got a lot more incredible stories you won't want to miss. Number 15. The 1971 AMC Hornet SC/360. American Motors never had the budget of General Motors or Ford. What they had instead was a stubborn refusal to accept that they couldn't compete, and every once in a while that stubbornness produced something genuinely remarkable. The Hornet SC/360 was one of those moments. AMC took their compact two-door Hornet sedan, a car that looked about as threatening as a hardware store delivery van, and stuffed a 360 cubic inch V8 under the hood. SC stood for Super Coupe, AMC's polite way of telling you this particular Hornet had secrets. The 360 produced 245 horsepower in standard form, but the optional 4-barrel carburetor Go package pushed that to 285 horses. In a car weighing just over 3,000 pounds, that's a combination that produces genuinely alarming straight-line performance quarter-mile times in the low 14-second range. Putting it directly in the conversation with Chevelles and GTOs that cost considerably more and attracted considerably more attention from both cops and insurance adjusters. The SC360 attracted neither, because nobody expected anything from a Hornet. That was entirely the point. AMC built fewer than 8,000 of these across the 1971 model year, making it rare even by the standards of this list. Even at car shows today, it's basically invisible, which, honestly, is the greatest sleeper joke of all. It refuses to announce itself even as a collector car. Number 14. The 1971 Pontiac Ventura Sprint. Pontiac built the Ventura as their version of the Chevy Nova, a compact economy car, for buyers who wanted basic transportation with a Pontiac badge on the nose. Nothing about that description screams performance, but look carefully at what Pontiac tucked underneath the Sprint package. A 267 cubic inch overhead cam 6-cylinder engine borrowed straight from the Firebird, paired with a floor-mounted 4-speed manual. Before you tune out because I said 6-cylinder hang-on, this engine was purpose-built for performance. It breathed well, it revved freely, and in the featherweight Ventura body, it created a driving experience that embarrassed plenty of V8 owners who should have known better. The Sprint wasn't the quickest car on this list in a straight line, and that's not why it's here at Handled. In an era when most American performance cars understood corners about as well as a refrigerator understands ballet, the Ventura Sprint could actually be driven with enthusiasm on a winding road, thanks to upgraded suspension, front disc brakes, and a rear sway bar. The whole package felt almost European, which in 1971 American car culture made it practically invisible to the muscle car crowd. They weren't looking for handling. They were looking for hood scoops. Fewer than 3,000 Ventura Sprints were built, making them extraordinarily difficult to find today. Most people have genuinely never heard of one. A shame, because this quiet little Pontiac was doing something interesting while everyone else was just making noise. Number 13. The 1972 Ford Maverick Grabber 302. Ford introduced the Maverick in 1970 as the antidote to the muscle car. Simple, cheap, economical, the base straight 6 produced about as much excitement as reading an appliance warranty out loud. But Ford, being Ford, couldn't resist offering the Grabber package with a 302 cubic inch V8, and suddenly the most boring car in the lineup got a personality transplant. 210 horsepower isn't a number that ends conversations at a car show, but the Maverick weighed only 2,700 pounds. Put those two facts together and the math gets a lot more interesting. 0 to 60 in around 7.5 seconds, which sounds modest until you remember this thing looked like it belonged in a high school parking lot and cost less than $2,500 new. The Grabber package added a hood stripe and some sporty badging, and not a lot else. From a distance, it still looked like somebody's grocery getter. From the inside of a Camaro that just got embarrassed at a stoplight, it looked like a very different proposition entirely. Ford built these in limited numbers before emissions regulations began strangling the small block, making surviving V8 grabbers genuinely scarce today. Find one with the 4-speed manual, and you'll make grown enthusiasts emotional in parking lots. Not that I'd know anything about that personally. Number 12. The 1973 Dodge Dart Sport 340. By 1973, the muscle car era was visibly declining, horsepower ratings dropping, compression falling. The automotive press writing obituaries. Dodge apparently didn't get the memo, because the Dart Sport 340 stayed completely committed to going fast while looking like it absolutely wasn't. The 340 cubic inch small block was one of the finest engines Chrysler ever built, light, compact, and extraordinarily willing to rev. It made 240 horsepower in street trim, and Mopar people will tell you at length, and with complete accuracy, that Chrysler's factory dyno sheets were conservative to the point of fiction. Quarter-mile times in the high 13-second range were achievable with a competent driver and the right rear axle ratio. The Dart Sport's two-door fastback body managed to look sporty without looking fast, a difficult aesthetic trick Dodge somehow pulled off repeatedly. The 340 package added a subtle hood treatment, some badging, and underneath, heavy-duty suspension, front disc brakes, and that magnificent small block sitting right where you wanted it. Chrysler discontinued the 340 after 1973, which makes that final model year particularly significant. Surviving cars with the original drivetrain intact are among the most sought-after compact Mopars of the decade, though most of the world still doesn't know that, which is again entirely appropriate for a car that spent its whole career being underestimated. Number 11. The 1971 Mercury Comet GT. Mercury's entry in the compact performance sweepstakes is so forgotten that even dedicated muscle car historians occasionally blank on it mid-conversation. The Comet GT deserves better, even though its entire identity was built around not deserving attention. Ford shared the Maverick platform with Mercury for the Comet, and where Ford offered the Grabber, Mercury offered the GT package, the same 302 cubic inch V8, producing the same 210 horsepower in a car of similar weight, just dressed differently with unique badging and interior trim. What made the Comet GT genuinely interesting was how completely it flew under the radar, even more than the already low-profile Maverick Grabber. Mercury sat in a strange middle space between Ford and Lincoln, and the Comet sat in an equally strange middle space within Mercury's own lineup. Nobody was looking at it. Nobody was writing magazine features about it. Nobody was inflating insurance premiums because of it. That mix of obscurity and genuine capability made it the perfect sleeper in a decade full of people trying very hard to build perfect sleepers. Production numbers were even lower than the Mavericks, making the Comet GT one of the genuinely rare machines on this list. If you find one at an estate sale, you buy it. That's the rule. Don't overthink it. Number 10. The 1970 Buick Skylark GS Stage 1. Everyone remembers the 1970 Buick GSX Stage 1, the Saturn yellow paint, the bold stripes, the hood talk, the 510 pound-feet of torque that made Car and Driver call it the fastest car they'd tested all year. What almost nobody remembers is that you could get that exact same Stage 1 455 engine in the plain Skylark GS, with none of the visual drama that attracted all the attention. That's one of the great quiet performance options of the entire muscle car era. The 455 produced 360 horsepower, and that staggering 510 pound-feet of torque numbers that in the GS body produced quarter-mile times in the low 13-second range. From the outside, this thing looked like a respectable Buick coupe, the kind of car a bank manager might drive to a golf tournament. Zero visible threat. Entirely by design. Buick buyers who wanted the performance without the spectacle of a GSX had a perfect option, and the people they subsequently embarrassed at stoplights had absolutely no idea what had just happened to them. Buick only built a small number of Stage 1 Skylark GS models, and finding one today takes patience, connections, and a willingness to outbid people who know exactly what they're looking at. Number 9. The 1970 Oldsmobile Cutlass W31. Say that name out loud to a serious muscle car collector and watch their reaction. They'll pause. They'll think. They'll probably look it up just to verify they're remembering correctly. That's because the W31 is a name that exists in a strange historical pocket reel, extensively documented, but so deliberately obscure that its existence feels almost accidental. It wasn't accidental. It was one of the most carefully engineered sleepers of the entire muscle car era. The W31 package centered on something Oldsmobile rarely advertised: a specially prepared 350 cubic inch V8 that was fundamentally unlike any other 350 in Oldsmobile's lineup. This wasn't a standard engine with different carburetor tuning. This was a purpose-built racing engine wearing streetcar clothes. Oldsmobile started with the base 350 block and went to work. A radical camshaft, ground specifically for high RPM performance and low-end torque, that contradicted each other on paper but worked seamlessly in reality. Factory cold air induction that fed the engine cooler, denser air than the standard setup. Cylinder headwork porting, polishing, valve seat modifications that squeezed every possible fraction of a horsepower out of the displacement. The result was 325 horsepower in the relatively lightweight Cutlass body. Number 8. The 1970 Plymouth Duster 340. If the Dodge Dart Sport 340 was a wolf in sheep's clothing, the Plymouth Duster 340 was a wolf in slightly sportier sheep's clothing, a little more aggressive in appearance than the Dart, but still fundamentally committed to not telegraphing its intentions to the driver in the next lane. Plymouth introduced the Duster in 1970 as a fastback companion to the Valiant, a sporty-looking variant of their compact platform designed to appeal to buyers who wanted a little more visual aggression than the vanilla Valiant offered. The fastback roofline gave it attitude. The performance package made that attitude genuine. The 340 package turned the Duster into one of the genuine bargains of the muscle car era. It was the same magnificent 340 cubic inch small block that powered the Dart Sport, an engine that had built a reputation across the Mopar lineup for producing disproportionate performance relative to its displacement. In the Duster, it produced 275 horsepower and 340 pound-feet of torque, backed by a 4-speed manual transmission option that made the entire package feel genuinely purposeful. The Duster's fastback body was light, roughly 3,100 pounds, and the suspension was properly sorted for both launch and cornering. They were modified beyond recognition. Over 50 years of hard use, attrition was severe. Finding a numbers matching Duster 340 with its original drivetrain intact today is significantly harder than the original production figures would suggest. The gap between cars built and cars that survive is substantial. A solid original 340 Duster commands $35,000 to $60,000 today values that reflect both rarity and genuine recognition of what the car represented. Plymouth built the car right. Time, enthusiasm, and hard driving did the rest. The survivors are genuinely precious. Number 7. The 1974 AMC Gremlin X58. Stop laughing. I'm serious. Put the Gremlin jokes away for the next few minutes and hear this out. Because the story of the Gremlin X with the 360 cubic inch V8 is one of the most unexpected and genuinely bizarre performance narratives of the entire 1970s. AMC introduced the Gremlin in 1970 as their subcompact entry, built specifically to compete with imports on price and economy, and looking like it was designed by someone who'd never actually seen a car before. Stubby proportions, odd angles, awkward styling that somehow made it memorable in precisely the way the company didn't intend. The Gremlin became a punchline. The jokes have outlasted the company that built it by several decades. But AMC, in their admirably stubborn fashion, decided to offer the optional 360 cubic inch V8 in the Gremlin X package starting in 1974. Think about that decision. Not the 258-inch six-cylinder. Not a modest 304 small block. The 360, a full mid-sized big block, in a car that looked like it was assembled from leftover parts. That engine produced 220 horsepower in a car that weighed barely 2,700 pounds. The power-to-weight ratio was absolutely absurd, comparable to some legitimate muscle cars. Stuffed into a subcompact that nobody was taking seriously as performance transportation. The handling was questionable by any objective standard. AMC built very few Gremlin X models with the V8 option before the engine got discontinued under emissions pressure, and changing market conditions. Production numbers are difficult to pin down precisely. AMC's documentation wasn't as comprehensive as the Big Three, but estimates suggest fewer than 1,000 total across all V8 gremlins, with the 360 version representing a fraction of that already tiny number. They're extraordinarily rare today. Whether that's a tragedy or a blessing depends entirely on how you feel about subcompact muscle cars from a company that no longer exists. What's undeniable is the sheer absurdity of the concept. A car built as an economy appliance, fitted with a V8 that transformed it into something genuinely threatening at a stoplight. A verified Gremlin X V8 in good condition can command $25,000 to $50,000 today, with values climbing as collectors recognize the historical novelty and the sheer audacity of AMC's decision. Number 6. The 1970 Chevrolet Nova SS396. The Nova occupied a peculiar, almost dismissive position in Chevrolet's lineup for the whole muscle car era, too small and too plain to be taken seriously as a genuine performance machine, which made it absolutely perfect for people who understood that being taken seriously was for people who wanted to lose races. The Nova was Chevrolet's compact car platform, designed to compete with the Ford Falcon and Plymouth Valiant. It was economical. It was sensible. It was exactly the kind of car that didn't attract insurance premiums or police attention. But Chevrolet, understanding the market better than most, offered the Super Sport package with optional big block engines. That combination was genius. The most potent factory offering was the 396 cubic inch version Chevrolet's big block, producing serious power in a car weighing barely 3,200 pounds. In its hottest L78 form, the 396 produced 375 horsepower, a number that was advertised conservatively and felt significantly higher on the street. Those numbers produced quarter-mile times in the mid-13-second range. Think about that. That's Chevelle SS performance mid-13s, from a car that was smaller, lighter, cost less money, and attracted approximately none of the same attention from insurance companies or law enforcement. A verified 396 Nova SS with documentation and numbers matching components commands $40,000 to $70,000 in the collector market. When you find one, the paperwork matters just as much as the car itself. Factory documentation proving the original 396 installation, the original code, the original specifications. That's what separates a valuable collectible from a questionable restoration. The Nova SS 396 remains one of the most criminally underappreciated performance packages General Motors ever built. It represents the sleeper philosophy at its core: exceptional performance, modest appearance, and the kind of car that could rewrite assumptions at a stoplight while looking completely ordinary standing still. Number 5. The 1971 Ford Torino Cobra 429. By 1971, Ford had already started backing away from its performance commitments. The company was responding to insurance industry pressure, government emission standards, and a shifting market that was getting nervous about raw speed. But before Ford blinked completely, they built one final statement: the Torino Cobra with the 429 cubic inch Cobra jet engine. Ford's decision to rebrand the Fairlane as the Torino was brilliant marketing. The new name carried performance heritage from racing. But because that same nameplate was slapped onto everything from base model 6-cylinder economy cars to NASCAR homologation specials, a Torino by itself told you almost nothing about what you were actually looking at. A driver pulling up next to a Torino Cobra had no automatic assumption of what was under the hood. A driver who didn't look closely enough could miss completely that this was serious hardware. That ambiguity was perfect camouflage. Ford discontinued the high-performance Cobra jet engines shortly after 1971 under continuing emissions pressure. That decision made the 1971 models the last of a particular line, not just a performance variant, but the final year of an engine that represented Ford's last serious push before stepping back completely. That end-of-era status has steadily pushed collector interest upward. A numbers-matching 429 Torino Cobra today sells for $80,000 to $120,000, and values are climbing as enthusiasts rediscover what this car actually represented. Ford people know exactly what this is. Everyone else is still catching up. Number 4. The 1970 Dodge Dart Swinger 340 The Dart Swinger started as the budget option in Dodge's compact lineup. Yes, that name carries some cultural baggage we're going to acknowledge and immediately move past. The performance deserves considerably more attention than the nomenclature. Dodge took the Swinger body, the hardtop version of the Dart, the lightest configuration available from the factory, and performed an act of brilliant simplification. They bolted in the 340 cubic inch small block V8, the same engine that had been quietly building a reputation across the Mopar lineup by proving that cubic inches didn't tell the whole story. The 340 produced 275 horsepower and 340 pound-feet of torque. Put that engine in a Dart Swinger body that weighed barely 3,000 pounds. Price it within reach of buyers who couldn't afford bigger Mopars but still wanted to go fast, and you had something genuinely special. The power-to-weight ratio was favorable. The price was accessible. The performance was available. The 1970 represents the engine at its peak, before any emissions-related compromises began softening its character. Later years carried progressively lower compression ratios and emissions equipment that reduced both horsepower and the driving experience's immediacy. Numbers matching Dart Swinger 340s from 1970 are becoming increasingly valuable among people who understand Mopar history. That growing recognition has a side effect. The window to find one at a reasonable price is closing faster than most people realize. A solid original is now commanding $40,000 to $70,000. The Swinger 340 deserves that recognition, even if the general market hasn't completely caught up yet. Number 3, 1972 Pontiac Le Mans Sport. 1972 was a transitional year for American performance, a turning point that created genuine confusion and heartbreak among enthusiasts. Compression ratios were dropping industry-wide. Horsepower ratings switched from the old say-gross measurement system to the new say-net rating system, which produced numbers that looked dramatically lower than the previous year simply because the measurement methodology had changed, not because the cars had actually lost that much capability. A car rated at 350 horsepower gross in 1971 might show up as 250 horsepower net in 1972, same engine, same power delivery, different measurement standard. The automotive press struggled to explain this. Enthusiasts panicked. Manufacturers leaned into the confusion, using lower numbers as cover for engines that still had genuine performance capability. Against that backdrop of chaos and declining performance legitimacy, Pontiac quietly kept offering the Le Mans Sport with engine options that retained genuine performance potential while wearing the most ordinary possible exterior. The Le Mans Sport with the 400 cubic inch V8 was officially rated at 250 horsepower under the new net system, a number that significantly undersold real-world capability. That engine produced quarter-mile times in the mid-14-second range from stock configuration, with the right gearing and setup pushing times into low 14s. No Ram air hood scoop advertising performance intent. No aggressive badging or special paint. It looked like the kind of responsible sedan that a careful parent might buy for a teenager they trusted to drive safely, which is exactly the kind of car that could leave a Guido owner questioning their assumptions at a stoplight. Finding a Le Mans Sport today with the 400 cubic inch engine and a manual transmission requires genuine effort, and a network of people who care about cars the general public has largely forgotten existed. Numbers are hard to quantify, but original 400s with manual boxes are significantly rarer than base models. Collector interest is growing as car people rediscover them. A good example today runs $35,000 to $55,000 and climbing. Number 2. The 1970 Buick Grand Sport Stage 1 455. We already know about the Skylark GS Stage 1 Buick's compact muscle car, hiding the same legendary 455 engine as the famous GSX in a much quieter body. The Grand Sport Stage 1 earns its own entry because it represents something slightly different and arguably more extreme. This was Buick's full intermediate platform, a larger car than the Skylark, wearing conservative styling that virtually screamed responsible adult transportation while concealing the most torque-heavy engine available in any production car that year. Think about that. In 1970, no muscle car, not the Hemi Dodge, not the LS6 Chevelle, not the 455 Oldsmobile offered more twisting force than the Buick Stage 1 455. 510 pound-feet of torque. Read that number again. That's exceptional. That's legendary. That's more rotating force than engines with significantly larger displacements. In 1970, the GS Stage 1 was the torque king. Full stop. That torque arrived low in the rev range and stayed there across the entire power band, creating a sensation under hard acceleration that felt less like an engine revving and more like a force of nature engaging. The throttle response was immediate. The power delivery was linear. There was no waiting for peak RPM. The Stage 1 455 made its point from 2,000 RPM onward. The larger Grand Sport body, longer wheelbase than the Skylark, heavier curb weight, more conservative proportions absorbed that massive torque with a planted stability that made the car feel almost effortless at speeds where other machines were working hard to maintain control. A driver could accelerate hard and the Grand Sport would just plant and go. It looked like an upscale Buick coupe for a successful professional in his late 30s who happened to enjoy not being passed on the highway. That appearance was magnificent deception at scale, and it worked perfectly throughout the entire production run. Buick built these in genuinely limited numbers, significantly fewer than the more famous Skylark GS models, and a fraction of Chevrolet's muscle car output. Finding one today with original documentation confirming the Stage 1 drivetrain is a serious undertaking. Original Stage 1 455 examples command $60,000 to $100,000 in the collector market, and prices reflect the rarity and the growing recognition of what these cars actually represented. When you find one, you'll understand immediately why the people who know about these cars guard that knowledge carefully. Number 1. The 1970 AMC Rebel Machine. And here we arrive at the greatest, most gloriously bizarre sleeper on this entire list, a car that was simultaneously the most obvious and the most overlooked performance machine AMC ever built. The original Rebel Machine announced itself with complete confidence. Red, white, and blue patriotic paint scheme. Hood mounted tachometer. Massive functional air scoop. This car announced its intentions with a volume that contradicts basically everything we've discussed about sleepers throughout this entire countdown. A Rebel Machine in patriotic livery was impossible to miss. And then, something remarkable happened. For the rest of the production run, AMC offered the machine in any standard color. Black, Rebel Machine. White, Rebel Machine. Silver, the hood scoop remained. The performance was completely unchanged. But the visual aggression vanished. A black Rebel Machine looked exactly like a slightly aggressive AMC Intermediate coupe, nothing more, nothing less. That's the ultimate sleeper transformation. The same engineering underneath, the same capability, the same potential for performance completely repackaged in visual anonymity. That performance centered on a 390 cubic inch V8 producing 340 horsepower, according to AMC's specifications. AMC had always been conservative with dyno testing and specification claims, which meant the real number was meaningfully higher than advertised, likely closer to 375, 400 actual horsepower. Torque was solid at 430 pound-feet, giving the machine a power delivery that felt more muscular than raw numbers suggested. Quarter-mile times in the mid-14-second range were standard from stock configuration, with the right gearing and tuning pushing times into the 13-second bracket. That performance, delivered through a standard color package that telegraphed no warnings, was devastating. The suspension was properly sorted for both straight-line launches and genuine cornering, making the machine a more complete performance car than its price suggested. The 1970s didn't kill the muscle car. It taught the muscle car how to hide. These 5 machines were the best students in that class. They represented a moment when regulatory pressure, insurance panic, and government emission standards forced manufacturers to get creative. When you couldn't advertise horsepower, you hid it instead. When flashy graphics drew insurance penalties, you went invisible. A Dart Swinger 340 looked like a practical economy car. A Buick Grand Sport Stage 1 looked like a senior executive's responsible sedan. A Rebel Machine in black looked like a Rebel Machine in black. Nothing special. Nothing threatening. Nothing that would catch anyone's attention until you were behind one at a stoplight and the light turned green, and you realized you were looking at something genuinely special. That was the genius of these cars. That was the sleeper philosophy at its peak. Which one of these 3 would you actually want to own? The Dart Swinger that was quicker than cars 5 times the price? The Buick that could out-torque any Hemi and still make it to the golf course? The rebel machine that was hiding in plain sight? Drop your answer in the comments. And if you learned something today, if you discovered a car you didn't know existed, or a chapter of automotive history that deserves more recognition, hit that subscribe button. We've got a lot more of these hidden stories coming, and you're not going to want to miss them.